What's up, guys, and welcome back to MacLeod versus the Movies, week number 12. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. You probably noticed last week's episode went up, then I took it back down, and then it's hopefully gone back up again. There was a problem with the audio in the edited video, and I took it down so I could re-edit it, basically. So that's why that happened. I don't think I have anything else to say, so I'm going to jump straight into the episode. Firstly, this week I watched King of Comedy on Amazon Prime, directed by Martin Scorsese from 1982. For a plot summary, an unsuccessful comic forms an obsession with a late-night talk show host. For my pros, firstly, Robert De Niro's performance. It's kind of haunting in this. This film is a very interesting mix of comedy and tragedy, which I'll kind of talk about later on, so I'll just focus on De Niro at the moment. He does a very good job of both. So he's our titular king of comedy, this wannabe stand-up, and he does a really good job of portraying this kind of quite sad, delusional character, while at the same time being quite funny as well. It's a very, very good performance from him. I really, really like it. Apparently, Scorsese thinks this is the best Robert De Niro has ever been in one of his movies, and he might be right. I've not seen all the Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese movies yet, but it might be my favourite in the ones I've seen. For my second pro, I think this film has some really nice cinematography. There are some really nice shots in this. They're not every shot's like amazing. Some of them are just, normal, but there's a couple in particular I really, really like how certain parts are filmed. There's a bit in particular when Robert De Niro's character, whose name I can't remember, he's called Rupert Pupkin, but he is recording a tape of him doing his act at one point, and it's really haunting and quite depressing the way it's filmed, but in a good way. I really like that part. For my next pro, I really like the presentation of this movie. In particular, we get these sort of fantasy sequences where Rupert's picturing himself and Jerry Langford. That's Jerry Lewis's character, the late night talk show host. We get him inventing fantasies of what happens, and we cut between the fantasy of him having these, soirees with Jerry, to then him in the real world sitting in his basement having a one-sided conversation. And they're really well done. It's quite depressing in a way when you go from like this lovely real world he's envisioned to terrible reality. It's really good. This is a really, really good movie. And lastly, I kind of mentioned this when I was talking about De Niro's performance. I think this film does a really good job of mixing tragedy and comedy well together. It's quite darkly comic, and it's quite sad actually. There's a lot of elements in this where it's quite sad. You feel quite sorry for Rupert in a way. On to my sole con for this movie. I think it's probably a bit too dark or intense or a bit too real for most people, maybe not most people, but a lot of people. What it's covering, that kind of obsession with celebrity and stuff like that, and obsession with fame, is probably not for everyone's personal taste, but I think it's quite good. But I could totally get people being put off by that. I think looking at it and like the reactions to it, I think some people were at the time, but I think it's really good. For my overall rating, I gave King of Comedy a 9 out of 10. Do I think you should watch it? Yeah. It's really good mix of tragedy and comedy, like I said. Really interesting film that I hadn't really heard much about. I basically only really heard of it because it's brought up quite often as like an underappreciated film, and it is. It's a really, really good film. Following that, on March the 18th, I saw Journeyman on Amazon Prime, directed by Paddy Considine in 2018. For our plot summary, we follow a former boxer as he struggles to adapt to life after a traumatic brain injury and the effect this has on his wife and young child. For my pros, firstly, I think Considine gives an amazing performance. I've never really seen him in a dramatic thing before, and he does an amazing job. He plays our titular Journeyman, the boxer, and he really, really gives a good performance. He does a good job of speaking as if he has a brain injury without coming across as, someone pretending to have one. And he has like a kind of tick that he develops after it that he maintains in the whole movie. Just overall, it's a really good performance by him. Part of what makes it so good is he's almost two different people. There's sort of Matty, that's his character's name, before he's injured, and then Matty after the injury, and they're almost two completely separate characters, but in a really good way. For my next pro, I think this film's quite emotional. It made me quite emotional. It's quite sad, quite upsetting at times. I think it just ties into that whole CTE thing and stuff like that. So, being a wrestling fan, I have a lot of people I like having traumatic brain injuries, so maybe that's why it struck a chord with me. But yeah, I think it's a very, very emotional movie. For my cons, I'm not so keen on some of the music choices in it. The music in certain scenes doesn't really fit, in my opinion. It just doesn't quite go with what's going on screen. It kind of takes you out of it a bit. For my overall rating, I gave Journeyman a 9 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? Yeah, it was pretty good. It was really good, especially considering this is only Considine's second film, which I found out and was shocked at. Because this is a very, very well made film, and it makes me excited for making more stuff. I hope he keeps making things, because this was really good. On Tuesday the 19th of March, I started to watch Thief on Netflix, and the file on Netflix is all corrupted and has weird video glitches in it, so I gave up on watching Thief and started watching another movie. On Tuesday the 19th of March, I watched Network on Netflix, directed by Sidney Lumet from 1976. For a plot summary, a news anchorman's rants on air make him a surprise rating smash. On to our pros. Now on to the cons. That's right. Network, a film that's considered a classic, number 194 on the IMDb top rated movies, winner of 4 Academy Awards, holding an 8.1 audience score and an 88 Metascore. I don't have a single positive about this movie. Let's jump into why. My first con is this is the most preachy movie I have ever seen in my life. Every character in this gets at least 1 or 2 long, boring speeches where you're getting, I assume, either the writer or the director's opinions slapped in your face over and over and over and over again. And they're not compelling and they're not interesting, because you can have characters do monologues and they can be interesting. Hell, some of the best scenes in movies or in plays are monologues. This movie has just long rants. Basically, this movie has one kind of message, and that's TV bad, mass media bad. And all I can think is, this is a motion picture that was distributed at the box office. You can't be having a message of, the media's bad while you're part of the media. It comes across as weird. It feels less like a movie and more someone's excuse to have a go. For my second con, I think the portrayal of mental health in this is a bit sickening, actually. I get that it's from 1976, and attitudes have changed a lot in the last 10 years, never mind in the last 43. But even at the time, I'm like, what kind of kicks the whole plot off is the main newsreader guy. I can't even mind his name. I'm not even going to bother looking it up. He says on air, I'm going to shoot myself in a week. And then he's not taken into protective police custody. He's not sectioned. I don't know if America has sectioning, where someone's basically put in a mental hospital for their own well-being, basically. But none of that happens. And they kind of exploit him. I get that, these characters are meant to be bad. They're doing the exploiting. But I'm just his kind of performance of being crazy is like not subtle at all. It's just basically him ranting and raving. And like literally raving, like and ranting. Like there's one scene where they go into like an office and he's just yelling on the stairs. It's really, really bad and has a really bad taste in my mouth after it. Thirdly, this is one of my main problems with the movie, and it's the opening of it. In particular, there's this goddamn narrator in this movie, and he is probably the worst narrator I have heard in anything ever. I've got written down here, it's like something from an old newsreel. So, usually when you have a film open with narration, it's either one of the characters being like, oh wow, I had my life pretty great, but it wasn't always like that, and then we'll go back to them when they were a kid, and then like it's their life story as the movie, something like that. Or you have something like a big fantasy or sci-fi kind of thing where it's you have to explain a lot of stuff. Usually, like, less so in sci-fi now because bloody Star Wars and the text crawl, but you can easily imagine that being narration instead of a text crawl, like explaining, oh, this works this way, in this world there are robots and they're called replicants. That's the plot of Blade Runner. But there's stuff like that. You could get it being in those kind of things. This movie opens with a narrator who literally is like, who's like something at Pathé Newsreel, so he's like, I'm gonna have to look up the character's name so I can do it. Howard Beale was an everyday news reporter, and he went out for a meal with his old producer buddy Max Schumacher to reminisce about the good old days. That's almost identically how the film opens, with more words in it. It's really bad. It doesn't fit the rest of the movie either. I don't get what is going for. It's like something out of 20s newsreel rather than something out of 70s news. I don't get if it's meant to be like a news report or if it's meant to be like a documentary. But no documentary maker in 1976 is talking like he's a Pathé newsreel, man. It's terrible. And why is it in the movie? How could you not establish in a scene that these two people know each other and are friends and what their jobs are? Like, here's how you do that. Oh, hi friend. Hi friend, I'm happy to see you too. We'll use our names so we can establish what our names are. Oh, how are you looking forward to your last week at the station because you're retiring? Oh, now you know he's retiring and where he works. It's a station. Presumably a TV station. And then he goes, oh, and they can go like, oh yeah, I'm a bit sad about it. I really enjoyed reading the news all those years. There you go. That's off the top of my head. I've not even planned that or anything. It's not bloody difficult. This movie sucks. And I looked it up and I found out this movie is the same year as Taxi Driver. I've not seen Taxi Driver and I feel like Taxi Driver I'm going to enjoy a lot more than I enjoyed this movie. It was god awful. Continuing on from that, for my next con, this film is tedious. It is so boring. It is 2 hours and a minute long, and it feels all 2 hours of that. I had to stop this movie twice. I was watching it late at night, and I was going to go talk to someone, and they were asleep. And I've never been so disappointed to see someone asleep in my life. I was like, oh no, now I need to go back and watch the movie. There's still 40 minutes left. In network, please, I need a break. It's so bad and it's boring. So boring. Oh god, I forgot about this part. For my next con, this shows you how good it is that I forgot about a part of the movie. There's a good review, isn't it? There is a romance in this that is one of the worst written romances I think I've ever seen in a movie. It's terrible. There is no chemistry between the two characters. Both of the characters are unlikable characters. I don't think this movie has a likable character. Oh, I've mentioned that later on. We'll get to that later. But these two characters, one of whom is maybe about mid-30s, and the other one, by God, he must be about 65. And it's really, really kind of gross. It's not very good. And they're not believable as a couple in the slightest. They kind of look like they hate each other at all times. As my next con, there's hardly any of the lead in this. I would struggle to tell you who the lead character is in this. You would presume that it would be the news anchor. He would be the lead, but he is hardly in it. His producer friend is hardly in it. No character is the main character, but at the same time, it's not like an ensemble piece, I don't think, because none of the characters are well defined, I don't think. So I don't really know. It's my last con. All the characters are unlikable. There's no protagonist in this movie. There's no one to like in this movie. None of them are likable. None of them are well developed. None of them are particularly sympathetic. The closest you get is the news anchor, I guess. You could feel sympathetic for him because he's being exploited. But he's so underused in the movie. He may as well... You could actually cut him out the movie, to be honest. And have all this stuff happening and never see him. And it would probably be pretty much the same. I hated this film. For my overall rating, I gave Network a 2 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? No. I don't care. It won 4 Oscars. I don't care. It's on IMDb's top rated movies, number 194. This movie was awful. I hated this movie. Bad movie. There, that's it in summary. Bad, boring, terrible characters, not interesting. I don't see why people can consider this a good movie. Like, I didn't like Roma. I could kind of see people liking Roma. I cannot see why anyone would like Network. And not even to think it's mediocre. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's mediocre. I think it's bad. Very disappointed. Following that, on the 20th of January, I watched The Breaker Upperers on Netflix, directed by Madeline Sammy and Jackie Van Beek. For a plot summary, we follow a duo who act as a breakup service for people who want out of relationships. For the pros, I think this is kind of funny at points. When this movie's funny, I think it's really funny. It's got some good kind of awkward humour. I quite like things that are awkward. Maybe because I'm awkward. But some of the scenes of this are pretty funny. I'll probably mention I feel like this movie's almost kind of like two kind of movies. I think the parts more focusing on the kind of breakups they do are the more interesting parts. This almost feels like it would work better as a TV series. You know, and like each episode they can be doing some kind of breaking up shenanigans, and you could have like, you know, long-term things going through each episode. As my next pro is I like the more awkward stuff, which I already kind of mentioned. The more awkward jokes kind of work quite well for me. Again, it's a comedy. I feel like there's not so much to talk about in comedies usually, just because of their nature. You know, they're not usually the things that are more technically impressive. For the cons, finally, some of the jokes did nothing for me. So I mentioned I like the elements more where we see like kind of almost like mini sketches where they're breaking folk up, like montages of that. Those things are quite interesting. There's kind of the main relationship they're trying to break up. The stuff with that, I don't think it's that funny. And that's kind of the main focus of the movie for quite a bit of it. And I don't think that's as funny as the other stuff. And some of the jokes I didn't particularly find funny. That's, you know, always a bad sign because I'm like, ugh. For my overall rating, I gave it a 6 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? I don't really know. Maybe, if you kind of fancy it. I'd rather, this is kind of weird because I've not made anything yet, but I'd rather wait and see what they make down the line, because I feel like the two of them are clearly quite talented and this film just isn't quite right. You know what I mean? But I feel like it's like the next thing they make will be great. This is okay. I think the next thing they make will be really good. I don't know what it is. You know, I'm just kind of speculating, but, you know, it feels like a really good thing's just in their grasp, but this isn't quite there yet. Following that, on Thursday the 21st of March, I watched Life on Netflix, directed by Daniel Espinosa from 2017. For my plot summary, a group of astronauts recover a life form from Mars, only it's not friendly. On to the pros. Firstly, I really like the ending of this movie. I'm not going to say what it is. I'm not going to elaborate on it too much. It's a really strong ending. Get into something though that kind of ruined it a bit for me, but I think it's a pretty good ending. For my next pro, I quite like some of the characters in this. They're not super well developed. They kind of have that kind of trope that some kind of horror things tend to have, where it's, this guy is dad, this guy is neurotic, this one has this character trait. So they're not super well developed, but they're likable enough. You know, for a cast of characters in a horror film set in space, they're pretty good. For my next pro, I think some of the CGI in this is pretty good, actually. In particular, the alien design itself. But the design, not so much. I'm not super keen on the design, but the actual animation of it's quite impressive. There are some bits in particular that are pretty well done effects. Onto my cons now. Firstly, you know I said how much I like the ending? The end credits and the song that plays over them is one of my least favourite things I've ever seen in a movie. I get why it's there, I think. I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm worried I'll give stuff away. But it's kind of a complete whiplash. They don't follow what just came before them. It's more specifically the song, it just doesn't work. I think I get what they were going for, but it doesn't work. For me. And for my last con, this film's probably a bit too formulaic. Not so much formulaic, maybe. Maybe it's more, it's the obvious comparison for films like this, but it's Alien, isn't it? You know? It's Alien on the space station, or the International Space Station, rather than Alien in super space. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just feels a bit too close to it. For my overall rating, I gave Life a 6 out of 10. Do I think you should see it? If you're a fan of horror, I think you would maybe enjoy this. If you like Alien and kind of want a similar film that's more recent, then this might be something you might want to watch. It's alright. That's the thing I would describe it. It's above average. You know, it's not bad. It's quite a decent little movie. But, you know, it's not anything to rant or rave about. Following that, on the 22nd of March, on Friday, I watched Lars and the Real Girl on Amazon Prime, directed by Craig Gillespie from 2007. For our plot summary, a lonely, delusional man forms a platonic romantic relationship with a sex doll. For my first pro, I think Ryan Gosling is excellent in this. He plays Lars, the kind of lonely man who's our main character. He is really, really good in this. He's really sympathetic. He's quite tragic in a way. Gives a really good performance just. I imagine it must have been quite hard to act opposite basically a mannequin for most of the movie. You feel like he is talking to a person rather than talking to a mannequin or a doll. And that's really impressive to me because that must have been really hard to do, and he does it really, really well. He's really, really good in this. For my next pro, I think this film has a really nice heart to it. Now this movie could have been something completely different. It could have been kind of sneering, and it could have been, cheap laughs about a guy dating a sex doll, There is a terrible, terrible comedy movie that could have been made for this, and somehow this excellent movie was made instead. It just is a really nice, kind of enjoyable, well-meaning movie. I don't know if that's necessarily the right term, but it feels like it's got really good intentions. It's a weird thing to describe a movie having, but, it doesn't feel cynical in a way. It's good. For my next pro, I think this movie has some really good emotional moments in this. This movie does a quite incredible job of making you actually care for the real girl. Bianca, that's her name. To the point where you kind of forget, not to the point you forget it's not a mannequin or a doll or whatever, but you kind of do at times. You stop sort of thinking about it as, you don't view it quite the same at the beginning as you do at the end, You don't view Lars as quite as delusional as he might be, And that's a real compliment to the script and the acting that you feel that way as the film progresses. For my next pro, I mentioned Ryan Gosling, but I think the whole cast is really strong in this. I think everyone's really good in it. They give really good performances, and like I said, I just imagine it being really hard to act opposite a doll and act like it's real. You act like it's a real person, and they all do that quite well. Is my last I do think this film's quite funny. It's listed as a comedy, firstly. I don't know if I'd say that necessarily. It's not like a, laugh out loud comedy, I'd say. But it's a really enjoyable movie, I think. And the funny moments it has are really funny, I think. My overall rating, that's right, there aren't any cons, because I'm giving Lars and the Real Girl a 10 out of 10. I went into this movie and thought, this will probably just be like a kind of fun, arty film, or it's going to be schlocky and crap. The fact Ryan Gosling was in it, I was like, it's probably going to be more in the arty kind of world. And I was really impressed. This is a lot better than I thought it would ever be. It's genuinely really good. Do I think you should see it then? Of course I think you should see it. I was kind of taken aback by how good this was. I think it's one of those films where the description doesn't do it justice. Because if you read that plot summary for it, it sounds like it's going to be a kind of, almost like a Farrelly Brothers kind of comedy, that kind of thing. But instead it's like a quite nice, sweet, emotional movie. Following that, on Sunday the 23rd of March, I watched Gotti on Netflix, directed by Kevin Connolly from 2018. For a plot summary, in this biopic we followed John Gotti as he rises up the ranks of organised crime. Just quickly, we'll go over this bad film credentials, as it were, because I quite like doing that now. I think that's like a fun thing to do. So, Gotti boasts an incredibly impressive 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, so there wasn't a single positive critic review for it. It was nominated for 6 Razzies, including the likes of Worst Picture, Worst Actor, Worst Actress, and just overall was lambasted and is pretty bad. Firstly, I'll talk about the pros. I have one. I managed to find one. I think the makeup is alright when John Gotti's really old and he's ill and he's got cancer. That's alright makeup. And that is my only review, my only positive for Gotti. Now to go into everything that's wrong with it. So, for my first con, and it's the biggest con in the whole movie, the actor playing his son. Now, I was shocked when I looked at these Razzie nominations that he wasn't nominated for Worst Actor, because I think this guy might be the worst actor I've seen in any movie. He is awful. All his lines are delivered terribly. He can't act, basically. All his lines sound like he's reading them rather than saying them. Do you know what I mean? So rather than him saying, "Hi, how are you today?" like, a normal person would, he sounds like he's going, "Hi, how are you today?" Like he's reading the lines rather than saying them as that character. He is atrociously bad. His facial expressions are all weird too. He's awful. For my second con, I've just written this down. Why does this movie exist? I don't really know. I don't get what the point of this was. There's no kind of theme. There's no kind of cohesive story, really. It's very confusing to tell what's going on. It almost seems to jump huge portions of time. I don't really know. I'm not really familiar with the real life story of Gotti, but it really, really is all over the place. It's very strange. It doesn't seem to have a message it wants to convey. It doesn't really seem what story it wants to tell. You can't seem to tell if it wants to be about Gotti, if it wants to be about his son, if it wants to be about the family as a whole, if it wants to be about the government being bad and organised crime being good, because that's an actual standpoint of this movie. We'll get into that, which I think is my next con. No, it's not. We'll get into that later. We'll go into my next con now, and this is one of the worst things. So, the music in this film is god-awful. It's really bad. I've written a few examples, and the first one to me is there's a wedding scene where Gotti's son's getting married, and the song is like, "I wish you could be the man that your father could have been." And it's like that, and you're like, wow, How is it from the on-the-nose wedding singers? Like, Christ. It's so ridiculously, like, if you don't get it, this is the theme of the movie, like it's hitting you with a brick. Then, oh, I forgot about this. Then we have this terrible cover version of the House of the Rising Sun, and it's so bad, and it goes on for like 4 minutes at the end of the movie, and it keeps going and going and going and going. And then, the piece de resistance, the reason why all the music is bad. Well, the movie opens and ends with these weird scenes with Gotti talking to us, like directly to the camera, and they're just kind of weird. I don't know why they're there. Following that, so we get him going like, oh, you'll never see another guy like me ever, or some crap like that. And then smash cut to, directed by, was it Kevin Connolly? Pitbull. Pitbull did all the music for the motion picture Gotti. I don't know about you, but when I think of, real life 70s, 80s crime lord, I go, of course, Pitbull. And he's rapping, and he's like, oh yeah, I killed some guys, but they totally deserved it. Like that, and you're like, whoa, what? It's really bad. Like, all the music across the board doesn't fit with the movie. It's my next con. I've got the bizarre ending portion of this. So, this movie doesn't really have, like, much of a message, like I said, until you reach about the last 20 minutes, where it seems to adopt the message of the federal government of the United States were wrong to convict John Gotti because he didn't kill civilians. It's kind of bizarre, because it's like, he might have been like a nice guy, but he was still the head of an organized crime family. This film acts like, oh yeah, he was totally nice. He only killed, like, those people that he killed. You're like, what? It sort of comes out of nowhere. I don't know if it's meant to be established in the film beforehand that people are meant to like them, and it's really just inappropriate and doesn't fit right. It just comes out of nowhere. And then it's got like the thing to act like, oh, it's a conspiracy by the government to get rid of Gotti's son and put him in jail. You're like, who took over the crime family? You literally said that in the movie. We'll get into this later on, but there's a reason behind all this bizarre moral choices, I would argue, the movie makes. Because you can have, like, sympathetic characters in crime films. Like, oftentimes we'll sympathize with the criminals, but they're still criminals. Like, in The Godfather, right? We don't get, like, a scene where, like, we're then told, is Corleone really the bad guy, or is it the police? Like, nah, it's Corleone, He's still a criminal. For my next con, I've got the terrible script in this. It's really bad. Just all the dialogue's bad. It's really badly structured. It feels more like someone's taken the simple Wikipedia synopsis of the John Gotti article, and then that is the plot of the movie, with nothing to fill in the gaps. Like, they ran out of time to film this. And this film took 8 years to make, so how did you run out of time? At one point, Al Pacino was going to be in this movie. Just wanted to bring that up. Maybe it would have been better. It wouldn't have. As like, much stick as John Travolta gets, like, he's not a great actor or anything. I don't think anyone could have pulled off the script that they're given for Gotti, because this film's just a bad movie. But also, you've got the terrible dialogue in the script, you've got the pacing is all weird. Like I said, it's very unclear what time things are taking place, because John Travolta plays him when he's 33, and then also when he's 63. You kind of basically can divide it into 3 sections. You have young him, right at the beginning, then you've got sort of normal him, and then him when he's got cancer and he's lost his hair. Those are the 3 Gottis in the movie. So all the middle bit, I have no idea what time period it is. And his son never changes the whole movie. The son that's the terrible actor, they never change him physically. Like, he just looks exactly the same in all the scenes. It's just a really badly made movie. Tying in with that, like, I feel like there are bits of the movie that aren't filmed, almost. Because we get these news sequences in it. There are just kind of things happen, and I don't know if they're trying to go for some sort of effect of, like, not showing, like, certain things, but it just kind of seems bizarre to me they don't show those things, because you could kind of do something interesting. So there's like a bit where is I'm trying to think of like the ones where they have that. They have, because sometimes they have them after things we do see, and sometimes they just have them after things we don't see. I don't quite know why they're in the movie. It smacks of we ran out of footage. It's documentary style now. To be honest, it feels like whoever did that, like the editor or whoever made that decision, watched another film that had that style of having news footage cut into it. Maybe something like District 9 saw a movie like that and went, I can make that. I can do that with Gotti, my hit motion picture. And it doesn't work in this movie. It's really bad. It's terrible. For my next con, we've got a lot of the time in this movie, the colours in certain scenes are kind of gross. It kind of looks like we're watching it through a lens that's been smeared with mud. And not in like it's to make everything look a bit more grimy because we're criminals, being a bit dodgy, like that. No, it's just looks gross. I've no idea what they did to achieve it, but it looks really bad. I don't quite know what they're going for. I don't know if they're trying to go for like that kind of the picture when you're in Corleone's office in The Godfather, and it's all that kind of dark browns and like that kind of thing. Except it just looks like crap. As my last con, I've already kind of mentioned this. This film feels super biased, and that's kind of because the Gottis were involved in the making of it. So they're like, yeah, he was a great guy. He's totally great. He's like, no, like, it's based on his son's book. You're like, it's kind of biased, It almost feels like a Gotti PR piece. Like he's, like, FIFA, the football board, made a film. I can't remember what it was called, but it was basically a Sepp Blatter PR piece because it focused on three main people. It focused on Jules Rimet, and you got that's sensible. He's the guy he created the World Cup. That's sensible. That seems a sensible guy to focus on. And then the two most recent ones, and it was basically Sepp Blatter and his mentor, and it was basically a fluff piece to have a thing about how great Sepp Blatter is. And this is what this movie feels like. So for my overall rating, I gave Gotti a 1 out of 10. Do I think you should watch it? No. I never even mentioned this as a con, but I'm going to mention it now. It's also incredibly boring. There are scenes in this where I was bored. There is a scene where a child dies, and I wasn't interested. That's kind of, a gimme to get people to feel something, in a movie. Because people don't like the idea of children dying, funnily enough. This movie couldn't even make you feel sympathetic for a kid. It's awful. I went into it with low expectations and somehow it lived down to them. That'll do it for this week's episode of Mild vs. the Movies. Just have to quickly pick our movie of the week. Kind of obviously, given that it was the film I gave a 10 out of 10 to this week. I'm going to pick Lars and the Real Girl for that. It's a very good movie. Really enjoyable. Really glad I watched it. I hope you guys check it out too. What am I going to be watching on Sunday the 24th? I haven't decided yet, to be honest. I'll see what I pick on Sunday. So it's a mystery movie for the first one next week. Ooh, exciting. All that's left to say is thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave comments with your suggestions for films that I could watch. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye. I can do maths.